Okay, hello, ladies. So good to see the ones are here, and I pray the ones that come, that listen to the replay, will be blessed by this. I am enjoying so much learning all this new techniques and new things, especially since I've been using a lot of them without um, I guess the psychiatry approval of a doctor, but through different conferences that I've been and trainings that I've had in my work and being my degree is in leadership and ministry. So there is a lot of psychology and all of that. And but it's neat to, and that was a long time ago that I had um, my bachelor's in science, but it's nice to be reminded with this new certification of mental health that I'm doing of all those techniques that a lot of you probably have been doing already. And you had no clue that there are a lot of medical researchers behind them, and that make them gives you the proof of how it works, even though I have to add that we're all unique and we all have, we don't all react the same way as, um, it's not a blanket for all. And it just shows that among the thousands that they have researched, then the majority responded this way or the other way. So just like I always say, medicine is a practice. That means they're practicing with us. They will suggest this, and if it doesn't work for you, then try this. And if it doesn't work for you, then try that. And so it's one of those things that we have to be proactive. I believe that our Father made us unique for that reason, so that we all have the mind of Messiah, and we have the Spirit of God in us who leads us to all truth. And then we should have that internal dialogue, and that should be the highest authority for us. Whatever science tells us, that's great. It just affirms what God has been telling us all along through his word. But it is nice to know that there are other people that this or that technique has worked for, and then you can try it yourself or in your children. And as I mentioned to the ladies in the Sitting at the Well, that we were going to start this month this overcoming the trauma, anxiety, depression, and grief. And it's a 6-week program, and it has a lot of information on a daily basis. And obviously we only meet once a month for the parenting call and once a month for the Sitting at the Well. So I'll be bringing a lot of that information that would have gone through that whole month in just this 2 times that we meet. You are always welcome to contact me for any other information. This is my practice too. So for any more in-depth that you would like, I'll be glad to walk alongside you with that too. So with that said, this we're going to be talking about, it's an acronym, or it's a mnemonic device, for this one works both ways, that Dr. Daniel and his wife, who is a nurse, intensive care unit nurse, have put together to remind us of through all the years that he has been working with mental health as a psychiatrist. There are certain areas that they keep repeating for all of us. And they use, I put, well, I didn't, I actually sent it to Sydney, and Sydney will be kind enough to put it there for you to have. And there are 2 pages from this program. You can buy that program and you can watch the videos if you want to. It will be I'll put that information too, so that you could, if you wanted to do that, you can do that. And even if you want to do that, there's a lot of information that it's given in a nutshell, and it obviously needs to be tailored to individually. But if you would like that too, I will be glad to help you out with that. But the basic premise of this, why I'm using it on both adults and children, is that you are the adult that takes care of your child. And just like I've said before, and many others have said before, when you are in an airplane and something happens and the cabin will decompress, the oxygen mask will fall from the airplane fuselage, from above your head, and you would have to put yours on first before you take care of your child. Because if while you're doing that for your children, you pass out, there is nobody to take care of them, right? So you take care of yourself first so that you can be there in the long run for them. So everything we always, and this is a spiritual premise also in any learning that we have to dish it out to ourselves first. We have to eat it, we have to chew it, we have to digest it, so that we can then serve it to others. As moms, we do that. When we cook, we test all the food before we actually feed our children. So it is the same system or principle. So what he did, and I call this episode today, Bright Minds. What he did with that was he created an easy way to remember all those 9 areas. And those 9, it reminds me of the fruit of the Spirit, that it's one's fruit, but it's represented and has different characteristics. They're not 9 fruits of the Spirit. And so this is kind of like that. The whole thing for Bright Minds is that our brain is the CEO of our, our mind actually is the CEO of our body, but the brain is the one that implements every order that the CEO gives. So with that said, we're going to start with the first letter, which is B, for blood flow. And with the blood flow, we see that obviously the life is in the blood, right? Is what scripture tells us. And the blood carries oxygen, and our brain, it needs 20 to 30% of the calories that we eat is used by our brain. So it is very important that we give our brain enough calories and enough oxygen for it to function properly. And Dr. Daniel Amen and the Amen clinics are characterized by the SPECT. They have imaging. It is a type of imaging, not like an MRI or a CAT scan, where they actually see the structure of the brain. This SPECT imaging is more of the function of the brain. So they see how all the different parts of the brain, if they're functioning properly. If there is enough flow, it would be nice and filled up and fluffy and complete, so to speak. But if there is any lack of oxygen, if there's any lack of nutrients to that part of the brain, you will actually see holes in it. And it's not like your brain has holes, but if this hole, let's say this is my prefrontal cortex, where we do all our reasoning and logic, and it's not full, but it is fragmented in little areas, so to speak, because there's not enough blood flow, then you could see it as what's happening here is not communicating well with what's happening here or here or here. So that has to be full. That has to be a clean going back and forth. And we have talked about before. I showed you some of the hand techniques that you can use, and it uses up the organs of in your body are being stimulated by this squeezing, by this hand movement, by this rubbing your hands one against the other. And a lot of times that it's easier for an adult. And there is another technique that Dr. Daniel uses, and it is called havening. And with that one, it calms our brain, and it is this simple. So you can go like this and use this for your child. And what you are still using all the organs that are represented in reflexology in your hands. You can even use it in your feet. We have the same pressure points in your feet, and just rub your feet one against the other. And with that, you are stimulating the centers of your brain that calms you down. So if you can think of the nervous system having the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, the sympathetic is the pedal, is the gas, is this what makes you go. It is the voluntary movements that we do. That's where the fight and flight is. We just go, depending on now that we're talking about trauma, that would be what would happen if an event takes place in your house or at a public place, and then your child will go into that sympathetic response. Now, the parasympathetic is the involuntary one, is the one like breathing and things like that, that we could, I could stop breathing if I want to until either I pass out or my brain takes over, because that is part of my survival mode, that my brain, unless there is something really wrong with it, it is impaired, it will not let me die. It will immediately kick in and it will make me breathe, whether I wanted to hold my brain and my breath, like kids, I'm not gonna breathe, and they go like that, and then eventually they have to breathe because the parasympathetic takes over. So that parasympathetic is the brake, so to speak, of that vehicle. So one is the pedal that goes, and the brake says slow down, and it takes over. And that is, you are using this to calm down that center. You're bringing the brakes in, so to speak. But also at the same time, we have two hemispheres of our brain. And a lot of times we may be lopsided in our perceptions of things. Not everything is on the same side. And you have heard about left brain and right brain and things like that. So you need to have a bilateral parasympathetic response. You want both sides of your brain to calm down. So you will do this, and by that you are using, that's why we use in the other technique that I showed you before, the right over left, and then you do the left over right. So that way you make sure that you are stimulating both sides of the brain, because we have a lot of tools in our body. We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, etc. So, and 4 extremities, 2 on one side and 2 on the other. So it is important that we get that also working on both sides. Sometimes there is the corpus callosum is right in the middle of both hemispheres, and it's kind of like the bridge between the two. And sometimes there is, like we had recently, a problem in that bridge over the Mississippi, and they couldn't use it, so you couldn't go to the other side. Sometimes that happens in our brain, and when that happens, it's communicating in one side, communicating in the other, but they are not communicating with each other. And one good technique for that, it is called, Dr. Becky Bailey in Conscious Discipline calls it the pretzel. And what it is you're going to use right hand and left hand, and you're going to put them in front of you like this, and then turn them over so that the right is going towards the left and the left is going towards the right. And then you are going to grab your, lock your fingers, and then you bring this in to your chest like that. So I'm twisted like a pretzel. That's why she calls it pretzel. And then I put my right foot over my left foot, or the left over the right. You can do it both ways. I actually do it one way, and then I turn my hands and do it the other way and put my feet in the other position. And with that, we make sure that our right side and left side, that corpus callosum, if there's anything that is hindering the communication between the two hemispheres, happens. And I'm going to stop right there because I know I gave you a lot of information, and I want to make sure that we are, that I'm communicating well with you. And I couldn't see, let me see. Okay, I couldn't see the chat. Anybody has any questions on that? If not, I will continue. But I just wanted to give you, because I know I'm going to give you a lot of things, and then you get to the end and then you just remember, the only thing I remember is the S for bright minds, but I can't remember what B was for. Okay, no questions. I will continue that. Okay, let me go back to then. Another thing that is important that we think, we don't think about that until we get older. And we think that it happens as we get older, and it's not true. One of the problems with Alzheimer's starts 40 years before it actually, you have the first signs. Sometimes it's 20 years before you have the signs. So, and not a good blood flow to your brain will be in most, it would create, associate with most psychiatric symptoms that would be a predictor for Alzheimer's disease. So brain flow is very important. Then the R is for retirement and aging. And we are supposed to continue this whole, retirement and all this thing is not really biblical. Because if we have the mind of Messiah, Messiah never sleeps nor slumbers, because he is the word of God and it's always active, right? And so that means that he is always functioning. And with that said, because that is the CEO of the brain, if the CEO is always working, it will be always sending messages to the brain to keep it functioning. So sitting on a sofa and just mindlessly watching a program or a movie or playing with a game that is not, you're just clicking things without really using your mind, you're not learning anything new, would actually bring you into an aging stage a lot faster. So your children obviously are in the age of learning, but you need to be learning, because that's what we want our children to imitate. If they see you that you're always learning, whether you're learning the word of God, we have the portions every week, and so they see you in the word, they see you studying something. You may have a hobby, and there's always new things that come up on that hobby, then you're learning something new all the time, and that is a great way to model that for our children. The I is from inflammation. And inflammation is important because if we don't keep inflammation down, like let's say in our joints, the inflammation starts eating up that fluid that makes the bones not go against each other. There's fluid in between them, so it's a nice and soft movement. They're floating in that liquid, right? It's kind of like the baby inside of us. He's not just there dry and it can't move. It's in a nice water bath that can swim and move. And even when it gets bigger and is rubbing against us, that liquid helps the friction so that they don't get hurt and they don't hurt us. So when inflammation is present, it starts eating up that fluid. And then you hear people saying, oh, my knees, they hurt so much. It's bone against bone, or it could be the hip, or it could be any other joint in our body. If you play any type of sports, it could be your shoulders, it could be your elbows, etc. So we need to bring down the inflammation and keep it at bay so that our joints don't get destroyed. And like that, there's many others. Our blood vessels would also, if they're inflamed, anything that you see with an itis, you know, if it's tonsillitis, that means your tonsils are infected. If you have otitis, that means oto is your ear, itis means your ears are infected. Or, you know, is the same thing with your oculitis, or if you have gingivitis and your gums, you know, any itis is an inflammation of that organ that pertains to that organ. So that's something that we need to keep in mind, that it is a symptom, it is a sign that something is not going right, that something is going wrong, and we need to take care of it. It's just a red flag that God gives us. And it is painful, because if he doesn't do that, we keep on going. How many of us are in pain and we continue to do what we're not supposed to be doing because, you know, we either don't have somebody else to help us, or we just push through thinking that I'm going to be tough and I'm going to do it well. It's kind of like your car having a red light and you're like, oh no, I'm just going to cover that red light because you know what, this car can take me there. Well, no, the car is going to break down. That little red light is to tell you, fix me so I can last you longer. And the same thing is our bodies. So then we go G to genetics. And genetics, obviously, it is something that we get from our parents and our grandparents, and it comes down to the third or fourth generations. We see in Exodus 34:7 tells us that. But also we have epigenetics, and epi means above your genetics. So you have your genetics, that is the code that all your, or the blueprint that your body uses to create more proteins. And that protein needs to fold in a certain way, and to keep it, it's kind of like, you remember those dolls that you would make, and you would cut it, and then you would put the next one, and you cut the next one, and then you can probably, if you fold the paper many times and you cut that doll, you will have all those dolls, you know, united that way. Well, or if you grab one doll and, you know, you have a template and you cut it, and then you, instead of using the template again, which would be your DNA, you use that doll that you just cut to make another one, and that one to make another one, and that one to make another one, kind of like the telephone message. By the time it gets to the end, that doll may not look like the first one at all, because every time you fold that, if you don't fold it right, it damages the imprinting, the pattern that goes into the next one, and that's how we get cancer. So genetics is very important, and we can actually, they used to think that you couldn't change the genes, and you actually can. And there's also that epigenetics that is above the genetics, that is not that it came from directly from your parents, but it's something that, let's say I am an alcoholic, and then that I raised my family in an alcoholic way, so to speak, because that's what they see me do, and they see me drink. And then it's not like it went through my genes, it was my epigenetics that makes them imitate my patterns of behavior. So that is above my genetics. There is nothing in my genes that said that my kids need to be an alcoholic. But if they do watch me do that over and over and over, you know, until the age of 7, they think that's normal. So they will imitate. We have mimicking cells that we will imitate what our parents do. So that's G for genetics. Then H is for head trauma. And this one is very important. And I am so glad I learned all this, because I've never liked very violent, like boxing. I don't call that a sport, because if it's going to hurt you, I don't see that as a sport. That's just my opinion. You don't have to take it. But it's the same thing with football. When you are hitting your head, whether it is American football and you're hitting your head against each other, or the Latin football, that is what you call soccer, you're hitting your head with that ball too. Well, what happens is your cranium, your brain is inside this bony structure that is not smooth. It's not like a helmet. You put a helmet and you see a nice smooth inside that is protecting your head, and you think, oh, that is kind of like my cranium. It is not. The cranium has ridges that are very pointy, and that brain inside that bone, it is like butter. It's very soft, and it is not like in a child. If the cranium is this big, the brain is this small. It grows into the cranium, but it is not the size of the cranium when it's born. So that's why when you shake your baby, that little blob of butter is going against the sides and against those ridges and pointy edges in your brain, and it damages it. That's how you get what it's called a TBI, or a traumatic brain injury. And if it hits like the side of your eyesight, then you can cause blindness to that child. Or if it's the ears, you can cause hearing loss. So there is a lot of brain damage that you can do to a child with those type of sports. And if you, so this is, Dr. Daniel says it, and I said it too. Just don't do that. Don't put your children in situations that they're going to hurt themselves. But if they are going to do that, like he actually is very famous among football players, and he treats them. He makes sure that they protect their brains well with those helmets, and there are different things that they have to do, to supplements and things like that, to make sure that the brain, it can rehabilitate. They used to think that no, you damage the brain and that's it, you're doomed for life, and it's not true. You can rehabilitate brain injury. So it may not be, depending on the type of brain injury, may not be exactly what the original function of it was, but that was your choice. That's what you wanted to do. So you get the best that you can after you have injured your brain. Okay, so head trauma is a major risk factor for psychiatric illnesses. We have homeless people that they don't know. I'll just give you an example of, and this is not somebody that was homeless, but somebody that started working in a factory, refinishing furniture, upholstering, and different types of construction. So, building and oh, what's the word? I lost the word. Finishing up, they put all those chemicals to paint and to seal and to take off and stain and all that. I'm not really good on any of that, so I don't know all the terminology. But needless to say, that had happened. This couple was being seen by a counselor because they started having a lot of problems. The wife started calling, she married a really nice guy, and all of a sudden he became a jerk. He was just mean to her and just got angry very fast and things like that. But the man didn't do drugs and didn't do alcohol, and they just couldn't figure out what was the problem. And so they went through counseling for 3 years, and finally the counselor said, you know what, I don't know what else to do with you guys. This is as far as I can. I really think you're just not meant for each other, and you need to divorce. And she said, no, but that's not what we want. We really want to work in our marriage. And she said, well, let me tell you, there is this doctor that does some kind of testing on the brain. It may be that it's something that has to do with his brain. Why don't you, call him and find out? So they did. They called the Amen Clinic, and they went through the whole program, and he got scanned. So when he sees the scan, that imaging, the SPECT imaging of his brain, it was like his brain was full of holes. It was so bad. So he thought that he was lying, that he probably was doing drugs, or he probably was drinking. And so the man kept saying no. He asked the wife and says, no, he is a jerk. He's really done things that I don't know what's going on in his mind, but he does not do any of that. And then he asked her, so when did he become a jerk? Because I'm assuming you didn't marry him like that. And she goes, no, he was a good man, a good husband. And pretty much about, 5 years ago, she said. And so he asked him, well, where do you work? And he tells him where he works. And he says, well, how long have you been working there? And that's when they put the two together and realized that he had been working there the last 5 years. So all that to say, those chemicals were creating such a havoc in his brain, and it was giving him, and you may think, well, big deal. He was smelling some chemicals. Yeah, right. So what? He wasn't banging his head against anything. And no, that those chemicals do harm your brain the same way that hitting your head or falling down the stairs or something like that could happen. And there wasn't enough blood flow in his brain due to that. And they got him on a treatment, supplements, etc. Needless to say, they did not divorce, and they saved their marriage, and he got a new job. But so it is amazing the things that we see, homeless people not becoming that. Let's say they get divorced and he can hold a job anymore, or he gets depressed, or starts drinking, or starts doing drugs, or tries to commit suicide or something. There is so many things, since we're talking about trauma and depression and anxiety, that can cause you to be a perfectly normal, healthy person, and then all of a sudden you go a down spiral, and then you end up in a place that you don't even know how you got there, or you think that there's no way out. But the good news is, yes, there is a way out, and our brain can be healed, and at least to a better functioning status that it was while we were ill. And it's what makes the whole body work properly. So it is the most important thing that we need to address. That's why we're starting right there with our brain and with this Bright Minds. Okay, so that was T for trauma. No, H was head trauma, and the T is for toxins. So again, is the same thing. A lot of mental illness and memory problems and dementia are due to toxins, like it was the case of this couple. And Dr. Amen has all kinds of stories about football players that have addressed because of their abuse. They would have to go to him, because they were saying you either get help or you can't play anymore, because either they started abusing alcohol or drugs or things like that. And then it was all due to head trauma. So they go together. Then we have M is for mind. Mind's storms in your brain. It has, it's kind of like a hybrid. type of organ because it has electromagnetic engine, it has electricity, it has neurotransmitters that help us think and feel, and all that needs to have the right amount. Is not just the flow of the blood, but also it needs to have a good amount of electricity. And that's what we activate when we do any exercise with our hands. We're activating those organs that are represented in those pressure points to create the neurotransmitters that do the communication with the brain. And when there is not enough electricity to send those signals, then the brain doesn't know what's wrong, or even that an organ is there. And to give you like an extreme example of this, I have a friend that in his 40s, or actually in his 50s, he found out that his eye, even though he thought from an early age, they told him that he was blind in one eye, that his eye was perfectly healthy. And the reason was when he was little and he had a lazy eye, the eye would just, move, and not that the muscles were not strong enough to hold the eye in place, and it would just drift. So they decided to put a patch in his eye, and they left that patch too long. It's supposed to be able to help you, focus and exercise that muscle, but they left this patch for too long, and the brain never got any type of signal from that one. It got signal from the left one. So the brain knew he had a left eye, but the brain didn't know there was a right eye. Because if there's no stimulus going to the brain doesn't know you exist. So it will not send you the feedback that it's supposed to. That is why it's a feedback. You're supposed to receive information through the eye, through that pupil. It goes into that like a camera, takes it back to the optic nerve, and then optic nerve sends a signal to the brain, and the brain asking the brain, what is it that I just saw? And the brain says, oh, that looks like a window. So then your eye knows, oh, I saw a window. So, but if that communication doesn't happen, the brain never received any information from this eye, and it thought it only had one eye. So no feedback, the muscles of the eye don't react anymore, don't keep the eye open, then the lid started to droop and eventually close his eye, and he couldn't see from that eye. And they didn't, because now there's technology to doing that. 50 years ago, they didn't have that to see the health of the electricity of that organ, and it had perfect electricity. It just never sent the message because it was covered. So think about that spiritually. So we have perfect electricity because the breath of God is in us, right? And we have we have everything we need, he says, according to the word, to live godly lives. But what happens if our eyes are covered to that word and we never read it, we never see it? There's no signal sending up to the brain, and therefore no feedback. We can be blind in that regard spiritually, right? So with that said, we go into eye, and that eye is for the immune system. And that would be if we have any problems in the immune system or infections. This, especially right now, there's a lot of us that are fighting some kind, and we think it's allergies. And what happens is, when the winter starts coming in, there is a big change in the temperature. And when you have between 20 and 30% of temperature change, so let's say you were in the 90s and all of a sudden you go down to the 60s, or you were in the 60s and you went down to the 30s. When you have that big drop of temperature, that big change in temperature, that affects your immune system. So your immune system may have not have, depending of, think about your immune system as being the guns in your, is your army in your body, and they have all these guns, they're well equipped, but you have not given it enough bullets. So you have the people, you have the guns, but you have probably the tanks and you have the helicopters, but there's no fuel for them because we are not eating well, because we're not giving it the vitamins needed, especially as it gets darker. There is less exposure to the sun, so your vitamin D goes down. So when all those things start happening, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I feel tired, and oh, my throat starts hurting. And what happens is we are a bundle of bacteria. And because we were made out of the earth, and grab a piece of of dirt and put it under microscope, and you're going to see the amount of bacteria we are. And they all communicate with each other, and they keep what is called the microbiome. They keep a good communication and a level of good bacteria and bad bacteria. It's leveled because you're giving it enough to keep the bad bacteria down. Remember, we have that duality in us. We have the beast side of us and the man side of us. On day 6, God created both of us. So that's why, we say the number of the beast is 666, because it's day 6. And that is the number. If you are a beast, that is the one that is the strongest. If you are a man, then you are the one that is strongest. The one you feed the most will be the strongest, right? So if we're not feeding our bodies, if we're not getting our army the ammunition that it needs and the fuel that it needs to work properly, then there are more bacteria than bad bacteria than good bacteria, and then there's a fight there, and the bad bacteria wins because there are more, and then you have a little cold, or it could be some allergies. So something is out of balance. So we need to keep that in balance. We need to protect our bodies, and in times like this, make sure that you give extra vitamins, especially vitamin D. If there's not enough sun out there, and you have to take your kids out there, and depending on how cold and what part of the country you are, just going out there completely covered, and the only thing that they can see is this, and not even the hands because you have gloves on, then your body cannot make enough vitamin D to protect you and keep your immune system strong. So you need to get some supplements, extra supplements during this time. So, okay. Oh, I don't know that we're almost there. I wanted to do this in half an hour so we can talk more, but okay. Then the M is for neurohormones issues, and we have all the different parts of our brain need different hormones, and they all need to be in our body. They all need to be balanced. When they are out of balance, then you will have less functioning, like our prefrontal cortex. If it doesn't have the neurotransmitters and the hormones to work properly, then it will be low function. In a low function, that means that you're not keeping focus, you're not keeping, your memory is not that good, and you have problems with self-control. So we see that in our children too, that all of a sudden it is important to pay attention to what is it that they're doing, so that it can tell you what part of the brain. And we're going to go into that so that you know what are the signs that you can look for that in our next class next month. So then the D is for what he calls diabetes, obesity. He put diabetes with obesity and made one word. And that is because there is a very, very strong correlation between diabetes and obesity in our children because of the excess of sugar intake. They're putting sugar even in baby's formula. It is just ridiculous. It's not even needed there. I don't even know why they would have to do that, but they just want us hooked to that sugar from, from the get-go. So it is important that we decrease any added sugar. Fruits is good enough. And by the way, a glass of orange juice that you buy in the store, it's about the amount of 6 oranges. God gave us an orange to eat it, because between the fiber that orange has and the amount of fruit that is in one, it's plenty enough for one person to have. Actually, a child probably would eat half of an orange. But when you give him a glass of orange juice, you're giving him 6 oranges or 7 oranges, depending on the size. And that is way too much sugar, because even fruits have sugar. It's a good sugar. And if it's combined with the fiber that orange has, it will help. That is a resistant carb, and that will help digest that sugar slow, in a more slow pace. And then the insulin doesn't spike up that strong as it would with a glass of 6 oranges that is pure sugar and has no fiber. Because on top of that, they sell that without any of the pulp. So you have no fiber to even slow down that process. Okay, so it is important. We'll talk more about diet, and the S is for sleep. So a minimum of 7 hours of sleep for any adult is important, and for a child, it needs to be around 9 hours. So we have research have shown that a lack of sleep, actually, if you sleep less than 5 hours a day in a prolonged period of time, you will get sick. It is a fact. There's something that it's not going to work properly in your body, because we weren't created to sleep that amount of hours in order to recoup everything, that all the functions. We have so many functions happening on a daily basis. We have an incredible computer in our head that needs that rest. But there are higher risks of anxiety, depression, dementia, and ADD and ADHD. So all that, that was page 6 on that workbook that I gave, that you will have in that added to the notes. But we didn't even go on page 7. It just gives you, what to do for blood flow or for the inflammation, on a general basis. And pretty much I explained that, but you can have it there. It's all written there for you to look it up. And now let me see. Let me see if there is anything on the, oh, I see the Rooted Cafe. Is that you, Tasha? I don't know who is on the Rooted Cafe. Let's see. Okay. Any questions while I read here the chat? See if I. Alzheimer's. Okay, so Mary Catherine is asking, how do you know whether the blood flow to the brain is good or not? Okay, so without that imaging, the only way that you would know would be by the signs and symptoms. And we will go over that, what each part of the brain will give us. Like I gave you an example of the prefrontal cortex, a child that has very low self-control most likely has a very low functioning prefrontal cortex. So we have to help develop that, and we have to help nourish that. And it could be something that it has nothing to do with a low functioning in a way of being a problem, but it could be just age, and personality. So there's a lot of factors that will go into that. And that's why I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg to get your wheels moving, and then you can start paying attention things in your household with your children or with yourself. And then you have a way to dig more into it, or, we can talk about it and see individually what would be the case, because we're all unique. How do you know? Let's see. Okay, got that one. The next one is, there's good to know the link with Alzheimer's and the blood flow and how to keep the blood flow. Yep, that's right, Tish. And then a mom of 4 sons, and totally agree about football and even soccer headers. I'm so glad, Tish, you're saying that. Okay. Mary Catherine. Okay, just FYI, the link that was sent for the text. Okay, that was an old one. You can make me co-host. Okay. I think that's all I have there in the chat. Anybody has any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, I'll ask you questions then. What are the ways that you can help your children to calm down, to put that break without, saying, stop it, don't do that again, or screaming or anything like that? What would be a good, healthy way? Anybody? The hand sweeping, yes. That, the havening. Another one, have you noticed that, like with your children, or if they're babies, they may, you hold their hands and their hands are cold, or their feet, or they're crying, and then you hold their little hands or their feet and they're cold. When that happens, our body has a way of implementing, that survival mode. It's there to keep the most important organs functioning. So if your hands and your feet are not more important than your heart, your lungs, your digestive system. So let's say that you are, the child is fearful, it's a bigger child, and it's fearful, and all of a sudden you see them, they're crying, or they're afraid of something, or there's a storm and they're afraid of the lightning and the thunder and all this, and you need to calm them down. One of the things, you can ask them to do this, and if they can't, or you touch their hands and their hands are really cold, that means that they have gone into survival mode, and that blood flow has gone to the main organs, and the hands or the feet are not an important part, just like your joints won't be, or your hair, or you're not going to start growing hair at that point, or your nails, because that is like the last thing your body needs for survival. So all that flow goes away from those places, so that the child can run, can go into their legs, it can go into their arms if they need to fight, if they need to run. So that's why the hands and the feet will be cold. So one of the things to calm them down, if it's an older child, and you can ask them to do this will eventually make them get warm. As your hands get warm, then you know that the perfusion in your whole body has gone to normal. It constricts when it needs to stay within the torso, and then the hand and feet will have a lack of perfusion, and therefore it will be cold, because the blood is what makes us stay warm. But as soon as you can hold their hands, you can make them warmer, you can put their hands in warm water, You can play a game with them. Let's say it's nighttime and they're fearful because they had a nightmare, or they thought they saw a monster, or remember their imagination and reality. It's very confusing for them. They most of the time don't know what's real and what's imaginary. So to fight with them about no, they don't exist and all this stuff is a waste of time. If they thought they saw it, that's what it's real to them, even though it's not real to us. And that's not the point. The point is calming them down so that you can talk. Remember, if they're down here in survival mode, they're not thinking, and we need them to think. So just calm them down first. And you can lay down in bed with them and take them to, let's say, to the beach. You can say, oh, just imagine we are at the beach and the sand is nice and warm. Your feet are on the sand, nice and warm. And your hands, oh, your hands are so cold right now. Why don't we put them in that sand too? And then you can even blow some hot air in their hands and say, do you feel the sand? Take them there. Use their imagination for good. And then they'll stop thinking of what made them be fearful. So hand warming is very important, and you can use that by using their imagination or literally using something that would warm up their hands. Another one could be aromatherapy. You can get some oils like lavender that calms them, and you can let me rub your hands and feet, and then you can put a little bit of that in their hands, and you can rub their hands. That would calm them. That goes into their bloodstream really in 20 seconds, and it goes straight to their brain, and their brain will calm them down. The smell of it, you can put it in their hands, and this is the best homemade or in your body kind of diffuser. You can just make a little hole like that. You cover here, you make a little hole, and you put your nose in there and smell. And that will be your little diffuser, especially if they're congested or something. You can put some peppermint, and that also calms them down. If they have fever, it helps them bring down the fever. Breathing is very important. Diaphragmatic breathing, the stomach goes up, not this. When we are nervous, we breathe up here in our chest, and it is shallow and short. We do that. So you want them to, when they feel their lungs, the belly goes up, and then the belly goes down. And one of the best ways to entertain them so that their mind goes off, what is bothering them, what is making them afraid, is put a little teddy bear on their belly, or you can put a pillow on their belly and say, let's see the teddy bear go up and down. Okay, so fill up your lungs, and your belly goes up and your teddy bear goes up. Okay, now let's bring him down. And make sure that the bringing out the air exhalation part is longer than the inhalation. So if it takes you 1, 2, 3, then you need to count more than 3 to go out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then breathe again. That's another one that it just slows down and calms down the centers of the brain, and it will be so much easier for the baby to be calm. If the baby is too little to follow your instructions, then you can download the calmness to them. You can hold your baby against yourself and you breathe for him. And then you make that sound in their ear. And because they have mimicking cells, pretty soon they will be breathing at your rhythm. Their breathing will slow down and they'll feel your calmness. But if we go, shh, 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 it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, all we're doing is making him even more and more nervous. And the baby will cry and more, and you're like, but I don't know what to do. The baby's just crying and he won't stop. And it's because you are downloading that anxiety and that fear, because you're afraid. You don't know what's wrong with your baby. And so that fear the baby can feel. And remember, the baby was inside of you for 9 months and knows your moods better than yourself. So whatever you're feeling, the baby knows immediately. Oh, my mom may be saying she's okay, but I can feel her and she's not okay. So that's why we have to put that mask on first. Okay, it's been an hour. And any other questions? No questions. That's one of the things that is really nice about being present. And I know some of you, like Mary Catherine told me already, that she was not feeling well. She can't breathe, and she can't swallow, and can't speak very well right now. But when we do this live, if you're in the live class, you can ask specific questions that are pertaining to what you are going through. So just to let you know, for those that are listening, it's nice to be able to get those questions answered. Okay, well, we will go over some of this in the sitting at the well. And of course, it will depend on who is there and what kind of questions will come up, that it will have a different feel to it, and especially since we will be talking more about us as adults, because we set the mood for our children. So with that said, I thank you, Tish, for your encouragement. And I hope you guys have a great month or a great 2 weeks, and I may see you in 2 weeks on the other one. And if not, I'll see you next month. Blessings to all of you.